Alright, so next training split video. Last video I covered push-pull leg splits. Now we're going to go with body part or bro splits. I'll kind of go over my definition of each one and pair it into one video since there isn't as much to go over within variations like there is with push-pull legs. So for me, I know sometimes these definitions go a little bit astray. For me, a bro split is the traditional 4 days a week, pairing a primary muscle group with a secondary muscle group. So like a chest and tricep day, a back and bicep day, a leg day, and a delt and calf day, or a delt, calf, and ab day. And then a body part split is just as the name implies. You're training one muscle group per day. So generally 5 days here. A chest day, a back day, an arm day, a shoulder day, and a leg day. So that's how most people will run them. They'll run either 4 days a week training or 5 days a week training, depending on if they're using a bro split or a body part split. And there are still some variations to these splits. And this is, I think, where people can get really creative with their splits. And I like this. But, disclaimer. As I mentioned in the previous 2 videos, talking about being able to milk as much progress with a split as possible. So, these splits are going to be reserved for the most advanced trainees. You want to have exhausted full body training, upper lower training, push-pull legs training before getting to this level. And not a lot of people are going to hit this level for years and years of training. And rightfully so. As you're just growing through your first years of training and you're just looking to put on the necessary muscle mass everywhere, you're not going to have too big of discrepancies in terms of body parts that are super well developed or super underdeveloped. If you're just putting on the necessary size to really be considered a bodybuilder, you're probably going to be a bit underdeveloped everywhere. That's not a bad thing. That allows you to stay pretty even in terms of your training and where your training volume is and managing frequency and all things like that within your recovery capabilities. So let's get into the splits and how people like to split these up, and then talking about some volume considerations, rest days, and then even varying these splits a little bit if you like. So the problem, I think, with most beginners, intermediates running these splits is the splits that I laid out, the 4 or 5 day, you're only training each muscle group once a week. And for beginners, intermediates, I like to see the frequency a little bit higher, especially for them, because at that level you are able to grow with less volume. You're being able to be acclimated to exposing your body to a new stimulus at lower levels than someone who's been training for 15 to 20 years as a top pro bodybuilder who's pretty much thrown the kitchen sink at themselves with training over that course of 20 years. Their training volume that they're not only accustomed to, but in order to grow, having to expose themselves to that novel stimulus has to be higher and higher and higher, and it's usually coming in terms of volume. So a lot of people pull that card too early, and they expose themselves to way too much volume, and they will make progress, but is the progress as sustainable long term as it could be? And in my opinion, no. If you were to stay on the full body, stay on the upper lower, stay on the push-pull legs for as long as you could. So if we're looking at the bro split, chest and triceps, say we'll say that's day 1. Depending on recovery capabilities, this is where people are able to add more exercises per muscle group. So if you're looking at training something once a week, you are in this case, you're training your entire allocated weekly training volume in one session. So with this one, chest and tris, you could probably do 4, 5-ish, 3, maybe 3 to 5 chest moves, depending on your recovery. Again, very broad, trying to get this to everyone just to learn the thought process. It's not completely individualized. But the take-home point is you're going to have more chest exercises in that session than chest exercises in a push-pull leg session, simply because you're training less muscle groups. So you have one less muscle group to worry about in a chest and try versus a push. Same thing for tries. You could add a little bit more work. So this is how I usually like to increase the volume, through more variety, through different angles, exposing yourself to more exercises, not losing the principles of progressive overload and being able to build up certain exercises that you know work for you. I'm not allocating throwing a bunch of random exercises at you for the sake of variety or for the sake of it being fun. It's not the case, but you do expose yourself to being able to hit more angles and introduce some new exercises that you may not have been able to in the past. So if you're looking at chest, now we could look at an upper chest move, a middle chest move, a lower chest move. So an incline press, a flat press, a decline press or dip. Totally options. And a fly pattern as well, or two fly patterns using different forms of resistance. Maybe a dumbbell fly for more length and range work, and a cable crossover for more short and range work. Totally possible. As we go to triceps, we can still keep our push downs in, keep our tricep compound in, our dips, our close grip push-ups, our close grip presses, then do a little bit more of specific overhead work or long head directed work with shoulder extension. Things are certainly in play there, especially if you have 2 or 3 tricep exercises to expose yourself to in that session alone. So moving along, back of biceps, same deal. Exposing yourself to new exercises. So for back, in the pull video, I had 4 exercises. Back's a large muscle group. It takes up 60 to 70-ish% of your upper body mass with all the musculature. So now you can throw some different angles at it. So things we want to consider are horizontal pulls versus vertical pulls. Horizontal pulling, your rowing motions, generally more back thickness, middle back, mid traps, rhomboids, things like that. And then your vertical pulls, your lats, your teres. So we have exercises that we can rotate there. And then also we have to look at our elbow position, where we're pulling. So generally the elbow being closer to the body is going to work more lats, especially in a vertical pull. Flared elbows generally working pretty much in line with the musculature that the elbow is in line with, if that makes any sense. So if I have my elbow out to the side and I trace it toward the middle of my back and it lines up with my mid traps, a lot of tension is being directed to the mid traps. If I have them flared up and my elbow is super high, a lot of that tension will be directed to my rear delts if I were to trace from where my elbow was to the musculature on my back. So we have more options. So we're looking at horizontal pulls, vertical pulls at different angles, different handles. This is where a lot of people can get pretty creative with back, especially if you have a lot of good hammer strength or other plate loaded pieces available for back. And then moving into biceps, more options there. As I said, I like to start with a preacher move, and then you have options for shortened and lengthened range, overload of the bicep after that as well. You also have hammer curl variations if your brachialis is lacking, so the muscle between your biceps brachii and your triceps, it's primarily responsible for a lot of the thickness of your arm. If that's lacking, if you just need to beef up your arms a little bit, hammer curls that target that brachialis are going to be a great option as well. Also, your brachioradialis, so the little horseshoe-ish shaped muscle by your elbow. That's a great one to be targeted with reverse curl variations. If that's a weakness for you, your forearms or the outside of your forearms, especially on your side poses, that's a great exercise to include. So you have more variation there. Then we go to shoulders. So again, shoulder press should usually be number 1. And then we get into fly variants for each delt head directly. So your front delt with front raises using cables, dumbbells. Your lateral head using dumbbells, cables, machines, I'm particularly fond of the cable cuff lateral, lying flat on a flat bench. And as we get to rear delts, again, fly patterns for those as well. Also face pulls, a great option. You just have more variety there to choose from, and adding some of those isolation and fly moves that you may not have been able to add in a push-pull legs without your sessions taking 4.5 hours and having way too much volume to recover from at that point. And then lastly, legs. Same concept. You might be able to add some more exercises in. At this point, training your entire lower body in one session could be a little difficult. And with the body part split, if we are really looking at a body part split, if someone was looking to train 6 days a week, a very popular move for that person would be splitting their leg days, having only a quad day and only a hamstring, glute, calf, usually grouped together. That's definitely an option. Again, super advanced level bodybuilders will do this because their quad training, for example, their volume, the intensity used in that session is going to be super high that they do not even want to think about trying to train their hamstrings or glutes after that. Again, you have to realize your role here and who can benefit most from these splits. And again, that level, that top pro who's splitting their quad and hamstring workouts, they need to. Like I said, they've hopefully exhausted all of their options split-wise as well. And they're at a point where their volume's just so high, that's the only way they can recover. And being able to train everything once a week in that fashion. So back to the bro split legs. Again, shouldn't really vary too much. Maybe you might be able to throw one more isolation move in there, knowing that you only have to train legs once a week, but the session itself is still going to be very demanding. So you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by adding too much work, because still realize, as opposed to the other sessions where a push session of chest, shoulders, and tries, back, rear delts, bis, all the other sessions that I mentioned so far in this bro split, you have less muscle groups per session. Legs on a push-pull legs and legs on a bro split, you're still training the same amount of muscle groups. But the only difference is push-pull legs, you're likely going to train your legs twice in 7 or 8-ish days. And for you to train your legs twice on a bro split or a body part split, it's going to take about 10 to 14 days. So they just have longer to recover. But like I said, you don't want to just bury yourself in the session to where your other sessions are inhibited during the week. So if we're looking at rest days and programming rest days within these splits, I like to keep the rest days around the more systemically taxing muscle groups, and that makes sense. So in this case, I likely will still keep it around legs, whether it's before, after, or both. You can also say the same thing for back and biceps. Back, probably the second most systemically taxing workout, following legs. Same thing, before or after or both, if you need to. But like I said, I wouldn't go too crazy with the rest days because you do want to still be able to aim to hit each muscle group once a week. And anything lower than that, you're really dragging out the split. So rest days, I don't want to say are as valuable with this split as opposed to push-pull legs, but with the sessions themselves not being overall as systemically taxing at this point to where you're comparing to, say, an upper or lower or push-pull legs where it's seemingly like you're blasting compound after compound move. These you have a little bit more freedom with your programming to where you, yes, hit your compounds, yes, progress your weights, but then you can move into some more isolation work based on your physique. Also with these splits, like I mentioned earlier in the video, you can get creative. So this is where a lot of bodybuilders, again, they've gotten to a point where they see their overdeveloped and underdeveloped muscle groups. So then they are able to prioritize their split around trying to bring up their weak points. And I don't want to say trying to maintain, but trying to pretty much keep their strong muscle groups on the back burner as much as possible. Because a lot of people, when they think of prioritizing muscle groups, they write a split and they end up trying to prioritize everything. In that case, they're really prioritizing nothing. So there does have to be some drastic changes in terms of your frequency for the muscle groups you're trying to hit much more frequently, your underdeveloped muscle groups, versus your strong or overdeveloped muscle groups that, again, you're going to back off that frequency a little bit to, again, let them maintain, make slight improvements, nothing drastic, just to improve the overall symmetry and flow to your physique. Again, that's going to be very, very individual, and it's going to take a meticulous assessment of your own physique, and a lot of people probably aren't even at the level to where that's going to be 100% necessary. So I hope you guys like this one, covering the bro split and the body part split, who it's for, how to program it, some of the exercise selection considerations, and rest times as well. So we'll be moving along in the training series. We're going to be talking volume and frequency. We're going to be talking managing all those through recovery capabilities. And then eventually, keeping rolling in the education series, we will be talking nutrition after that.